Let's break down how I made this cyberpunk tower scene for my upcoming short film, The Awakening. As always, I started with references. I generated a few pictures of cyberpunk control towers through different AI using ChatGPT and Gemini. Then I started modeling the cylindrical tower using the reference images. The goal was to get the silhouette right very first. Because if the silhouette doesn't work with dramatic lighting and fog, then we've gone wrong somewhere down the line. So I modeled a few different floors with sections in between them to have an organic, built over time kind of feel instead of something manufactured from scratch. Then I added some cylinders and scaled them up along the z-axis to make some pipes and utility vents. I created different sections in the pipes using loop cuts and increased the thickness of some sections randomly. I also decided to take the different sections of the tower and slightly displace them from the central axis and increase the thickness of some sections to avoid it from looking too perfect. After this, I added some circular curves around the sections of the tower and made some more pipes going around the tower sections. Also, I added loop cuts around the intersections of two pipes and increased the thickness of one pipe to make some connectors over there. The amount of detail you need to add will depend on how close the camera is going to be to the tower. This level of detail might work for a medium shot, but for a really close-up angle, I might have to go back and add some more details in them. I made some boxes and utility structures on the surface and then insert some faces to form a grate or a vent. I used another duplicated face to add some loop cuts, bevel them and extrude them outwards to make the fins for the grates or vent. I had separated these duplicated faces from the main tower, so that's why I'm having to go in again for each level of the grate. Here's a short time lapse of me adding more details such as curved pipes using bridge to edge loops feature, which actually seems like overkill right now, but it may come in handy during some close-up shots later. And slowly the silhouette was coming together, but the roof and the base seem quite empty right now, so let's start fixing that. Scaled up and extruded the base outwards a little bit, and then I selected some faces around the tower and decided to give them extra reinforcement. Not bad, but let's get to the roof now. I have these simple low poly roof assets designed from before. If you want, just comment below and I'll drop these in a free asset pack, or these are simple enough to be designed by yourself in a few hours. I started populating the roof with the rooftop assets I had. These were not accurately placed, but required for an interesting silhouette and the storytelling part of this tower in this current scene. So I had to think of all the access points and the ways of transport in these places to make the tower actually accessible for the story point of view. I believe some part of the tower, about half of it, could have an elevator shaft and it takes the employee to a certain level. So I designed a simple shaft and an elevator capsule with an access room beside it. Now if someone really needed to access the mainframe or the broadcast system, they'd have to go the rest of the way through manual effort, that is climbing the stairs. I'm not saying you have to go too deep into it, but always think of these story points if you're designing them for a scene. It'll help in your world building and cohesion. To reach from the topmost level of the tower to the ceiling where the mainframe access would be, I made a set of ladders and a simple shed kind of structure on the roof, which I'll be designing later for the close-ups. So with this, I have ticked off all the main story points that the tower needed to have for my script, and then it was time to start texturing. I started with a simple base material, turned the metallic slider all the way to the right, and added a noise texture with a mapping node and a color ramp to create some dry and wet patches on the base material of the tower. You can tweak the roughness amount by moving around the color ramp sliders. Instead of using too much geometry or displacement texture for details, I downloaded a free sci-fi panels normal map from the internet, plugged this in to the height of the bump node and connected the bump output to the normal. This gives us some good mid-level detail and the appearance of sci-fi panels on the surface without using too much geometry. Then I started texturing the other pipes and structures using free materials from Blender Kit, quick and dirty cube projection. I also added some emissive surfaces, especially behind the grate and the platform separating the different floors. Added a fog volume and tested some dramatic lighting to see how the silhouette was looking. Once I was happy with it, it was time to add the camera and start framing the shot. I changed the resolution to 1920 by 816 pixels to get the 235 aspect ratio, and then brought in some of the buildings I had designed in my previous tutorials and live streams to populate the scene around the tower. I just started by making the foreground, midground and background layers, added a volume scatter fog cube, a night sky HDRI, and started testing the lighting. I populated the scene with more buildings I had designed before. Let me know in the comments down below if you would like these buildings as an asset pack as well. Instead of adding too many buildings to the background to fill up the vast skyline, I just brought in some blocky, low poly building assets that I made for the background, which does the job in a few seconds. You can check out this and more Cyberpunk related tutorials in the playlist that I'm linking on the top right here. And the final layer was adding foreground details. Some cables going across buildings, tops of buildings cut off to amplify scale and stuff like that. The video I'm linking above here shows how to composite rain in Blender. Click on that link to know more, or you can just use After Effects or DaVinci Resolve to composite some rain layers in. I use real VFX elements and that makes the shot look pretty good in my opinion. Let me know how you like the shot and subscribe to know more about the Neon Dreams Awakening project.